Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Heritage Ohio's webinar on Special Improvement Districts. Today, we'll be taking questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of your panel. We'll do the questions at the end of the webinar, and I'll be reading those off, so all you have to do is type those into your chat box. If you have any problems with the software at all, close the program down and restart. The same is true if you're on the telephone. Hang up and redial the number you were given. We will be sharing this PowerPoint with all of the attendees at the end of the session, and I believe Mark has some additional materials that we will also forward to you. This webinar has been approved for AIA, architectural credits. If you need 1 credit for this webinar, please contact me directly and I'll get you signed up for that. I now would like to introduce Mark Lammon, who's Director of Operations and Advocacy for the Downtown Cleveland Alliance. Mark manages the operations for Ohio's largest special improvement district, which has over 70 employees and includes an area of over 105 blocks. Mark, take it away.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay, and I appreciate you following with me here. I know this has been rescheduled twice, so I appreciate you holding on with me as we go through this. So, Joyce, thanks for the introduction. I'll start right in with what Downtown Cleveland Alliance is. If you haven't heard of us before, the Alliance is a little bit of a unique situation in that we're not a Main Street program or a CDC. We're an umbrella organization that advocates for the entire downtown area, and we partner with our neighborhood-based partners, which is the Gateway District, the Warehouse District, and Playhouse Square, to deliver those typical CDC roles. And then we also manage the Special Improvement District on behalf of that organization as well. And we were created through a joint ventureship with those partners and the foundations because we wanted an organization that looked at the whole of downtown. So you can see our mission statement here for your review. Wait for the map to go. So this area is what we consider all of downtown, but the pink boundary is our Special Improvement District, and as Joyce mentioned, it's over 105 blocks. It's a very large district. In other cities, the individual sub-districts, which you would see there as Warehouse, Tower City, Gateway, Theater, Playhouse Square, and Erie View, sometimes are independent special improvement districts, but in our case, we decided the best way to do this was to make downtown all one organization and then advocate for it as a whole. These are some of our most visible program is the Clean and Safe program. Our Special Improvement District raises about $3.1 million a year, which about 75 to 80% of that is spent on the Clean and Safe program. When we started the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, we recognized that in order to increase economic investment, our best priority was to change the perception and the reality to make sure people knew that downtown was in fact clean and safe. So what is a Special Improvement District? As it's said on here, an economic development tool which allows property owners and merchants within a geographic area to band together to use the city's assessment powers. So just as a note, the city does collect the assessment, or county, depending on where you're at. The self-imposed assessment is used by the property owners to maintain and improve their district. The reason I wanted to read this to you, and you'll note the footnote down there, including, I noticed it's cutting off a little bit on the right. There is a great manual that the City of Cleveland put together in 2004, which is about 100 pages long, and it is a step-by-step, including worksheets and everything that needs to be done to create a special improvement district. And you'll notice that in there it's called the 2004 bid manual. In Ohio, the Special Improvement District is the legal name for this type of organization, but throughout the country, entirely different names. We call them Business Improvement District, Economic Target Areas. Canada calls them Commercial Improvement Districts, but they, in essence, are all one and the same. So for this purpose, areas, we'll call them special improvement districts, but you might hear other terms for the name, but they are the same. So the question you may ask is, what can you use a special improvement district for? Well, I jokingly put down whatever you want, but really it's whatever best suits your neighborhood. In our example, and with most cities the size of Cleveland, it's a clean and safe program that is primarily done. But in smaller, more targeted neighborhoods, sometimes the special improvement district can just be to maintain a streetscape infrastructure project or provide marketing for the district as a whole. It can also be used as a way to get loans to do a capital improvement project, so you could get the loan and then pay the assessment back over time. All these things are capable of being used for the special improvement district. It's just your choice, and it's neighborhood based on what works best for you. In the state of Ohio, there are two legislative bodies for any policy wonks out there who want to look this up. It's Chapter 727, which is an older chapter that allows the city to collect an assessment based on whether a sidewalk needs to be repaired in a neighborhood or if there's perhaps a street lighting project that needs to be done. This was passed and able to assess homeowners and businesses along the affected area. Chapter 1710, which was passed in 1994, which, if you note, Ohio was very, very late in the game on special improvement districts. Canada was actually the leader in this, but Ohio was in the late 30s in terms of the states that actually passed this, so it's relatively new here in Ohio. Who are the major players? Obviously, the city needs to be involved because they are the legal mechanism for collecting the assessments. And I just want to point out the city can collect the assessment for you ahead of time if you get the special improvement district passed. But if people do not voluntarily go ahead, it will end up on their property tax record. And we have a system which I can get into if people would like, where property owners can pay into the special improvement district ahead of time rather than having it go onto their property taxes. The second group is the community development organization, which most of you, I'm sure, represent. And this can be a CDC, it can just be an advocacy group, it can be whoever. In fact, there are some churches that have been the major special improvement district areas. And then it's the property owners and the stakeholders. Ultimately, it is the actual property owner that needs to sign the petition. So regardless of who occupies the building, the person who owns the property must be the one that signs off on it. So you see here a breakdown of the responsibilities for passing the special improvement district. While the city has the most to do in terms of getting the legislation passed, the contract, and the oversight, it really is the community development organization that the brunt of the work relies on, because you are the liaison and advocate for constantly having to, for trying to get this passed, which is no easy task at all. And obviously you also have to have the stakeholders be involved. If you don't have a majority of the stakeholders, you won't get this passed. Most organizations that do pass a special improvement district end up being the implementation agency as well, and I'll get into that a little later in terms of how contracts look and how services are actually performed. And I do want to note, again, in this presentation, I don't want to have to go through the technical resources of the worksheets and stuff that need to be done. I can actually provide that manual through Joyce so that you have all that in hand if you choose to go down this path. So the step-by-step in a nutshell for the special improvement district is determining the boundaries, which may sound very obvious, but the special improvement district must be continuous. You can't jut properties in and out of it just to get the thing passed. So it can be linear in the sense that it's only one street and goes in 20 feet down alleyways, but you can't cut and gerrymander properties in and out of the district to be able to get it to pass. So that's the first step. Second, you have to go to the city And this can be a very arduous process, but finding out who the actual property owner of the property is. Most of our properties, like I'm sure all your cities, are owned by LLCs that don't have the property owner's name in them, so that can be also very difficult. Third, you have to go to the city and verify this so you can get the petitions in the right name. And then you have to prepare the petition for the property owners. And it's important to note that while your assessment mechanism may be different than the actual voting petition mechanism, you do need 60% of the front footage or 75% of the area to get this to pass. And there isn't, you can set a time limit for yourself, but you can have the petitions out as long as you want. And then you can submit the petitions to the city for verification, and then it's on the city's responsibility to find out if the petitions are correct and then pass the necessary legislation within the respective council and then begin collecting the assessment. While this is a step-by-step process, all this sort of happens at the same time. If any of you have ever gone through this process or looked at going through this process, you'll know that you're starting at step 1 and step 7 at the same time, and everybody is trying to work together to get this passed holistically. So probably the most important thing in creating a special improvement district is actually selling the special improvement district. And I want to talk a little bit about some best practices and some common mistakes that occur when creating these special improvement districts. It is a lot easier to pass a special improvement district if some of your larger property owners can get on board ahead of time. So if you actually look, if you have one entity or maybe 1 or 2 properties that are your majority landowners, if you can actually turn them into champions of the special improvement district, property owners tend to look upon their fellow property owners a bit more favorably than, say, the community development organization going to them and saying you should do this. If the property owners are actually banding together themselves, it's a lot easier to get that vision passed. So as I mentioned, 1 and 2, try to get them to work together, to band together to get the special improvement district passed. Second, looking at similar areas to your neighborhood for what might be a best practice. Cleveland was very, very late in the game of creating a special improvement district. In fact, we were the second to last one in of the major 5 cities to create one. And so we were able to go to Cincinnati and Columbus and say, look what they're doing down there, and help sell the vision. And Pittsburgh, we visited as well to try to get our property owners to understand what they had going for them. And then the vision. One of the common mistakes here in creating a special improvement district is selling the assessment and not the vision. You have to be able to say what you're going to do as opposed to this is how much money we can raise. And I mean that is you have to have a plan with what you're going to do with the money before you can go out and sell it. And then there's always this selling point here. In Cleveland, for example, we just passed a school levy that is not self-renewing. The SID in Ohio is not a self-renewing entity. You can set the time frame for the assessment when you do the petitions. Typically, it's a 5-year time frame. Some people do 10, but you can set it at what you want. But one of the ideas is if you can sell, you can mention during the petition process and the stakeholder engagement process that, look, if we don't deliver, the SID will go away because we didn't do our job. This doesn't automatically renew. As in other states, for example, Pennsylvania, the SID is created forever unless the property owners band together to remove it. So in Ohio, we're in a different position in that we have to constantly go back during certain time frames to get it renewed. So the common mistakes, as I mentioned, while this has happened more than once before, I've met with people, you do have to have the comprehensive services plan attached to the petition. What I've seen when I've talked to other groups, one of the things that happens is they try to figure out how much money they can raise, and then once they have the money, to figure out what they can do with it. Technically, that's illegal. However, it doesn't get caught very often. You do have to have exactly how you're going to use the money that's in the assessment. For example, with our organization, we mentioned that 70% or 75% of the dollars spent will be used on cleans and security services, and the remaining dollars will be used on marketing services. And you have to spell out what that is within the plan with the petition that they've signed. Secondly, especially when it comes to smaller special improvement districts, actually making sure somebody can complete and deliver those services. I've talked to counterparts in other parts of the state where smaller improvement districts have been created, but they don't actually have, they don't create enough dollars for some of the national contracting firms like janitorial services or a block by block, and then they get stuck with having to deliver the services directly, which is fine, but it might not be the best thing if you don't want to get into the HR issues of having a clean and safe program yourself, or for example, somebody may not be able to deliver snow removal for the price of the assessment that you created. And then thirdly, in our program, we have an inflation rate, and we also assume a 5% delinquency on our assessment. So every year, our assessment goes up 3% to help with inflation, which is great. And we also make sure that we assume that we're not going to collect 5% of that because of foreclosure, or the property owner cannot be contacted. We have had that, especially in 2008. We had quite a bit of the properties not pay into the assessment, but it has gotten better over the years, where it's usually around 3 or 4%. So with the assessment, you can actually set the assessment on however you wish. I do want to point out that in our assessment model and others, residents are assessed. So if you do have apartment buildings in your area or condos, the way that we assess them is the building as a whole gets assessed through the association, and then the association divides the assessment based on the number of units, and then they handle it from there. But you can make the assessment based on front footage or value, or in some cases just a solid number per property, although that doesn't work very well if you have large and small property owners, because it's not a fair, equal board the assessment. And I want to go back to this. Remember that the voting model is much different than the assessment. In our case, some of our parking lots, because they have so much linear front footage on all sides, actually have a massive amount of voting power, but their actual assessment is very, very low because they have no value. I mean that being parking lots don't have as much value as obviously a building. So keep that in mind, that maybe your highest ratepayer may not be your highest powered voting member, keeping that in mind and trying to get this passed. And I put in here what the DCA assessment is, and we based ours on 2 factors. So for the $7.75 per linear front footage is based on our clean model, and then we add that with obviously the fraction of a percentage of market value. And in our case, we actually capped the market value at $100 million in order to keep the major skyscrapers here in the area and office towers from having to pay an exorbitant fee for the assessment. So you've gone through the entire process, which usually takes about 18 months, depending on how many property owners you have and how fast your municipality can process, check, obtain the property tax records, and then pass through legislation. If you're like us and your city council recesses in the summer, we always try to get this done before they're gone in the summer, or we'll sit and lag until they come back in the fall. During that time frame, you can submit the RFP, try to get contractors in and to sell the plan, and then you're constantly still working with stakeholders and doing public outreach, making sure that people know that the special improvement district is in formation and ready to go. And this is very important for if you want to use the special improvement district as leverage to create more economic benefit. We use the special improvement district dollars as a selling point in order to raise money through philanthropic and business sources. So we actually will go to foundations and companies and say our property owners believe in and have invested in downtown. Therefore, please, match some of the dollars that we're raising so that we can enhance it. And we actually are close. We're usually able to about double the amount of money that we raise in the assessment through public outreach and leveraging those dollars. So the contract model is very important because once you create the special improvement district, it does exist as its own entity with its own board. With downtown Cleveland, there's actually an organization called Downtown Cleveland Improvement Corporation, which is a 501c3, also the special improvement district, and that contracts with Downtown Cleveland Alliance to provide the staff and services and act as its agent. And then for us, Downtown Cleveland Alliance contracts with the national contractor block by block to perform our clean and safe services. And another instance where we are actually the contractor, the Market District Improvement Corporation in Ohio City first contracts with Ohio City to provide the staff, and then Ohio City contracts with Downtown Cleveland Alliance to provide those services. So this is one of those examples where a smaller special improvement district that was next to ours was able to leverage some of our resources, and we were able to band together to provide services across the river. So you've gone through the whole process in the last 18 months, and now you have a special improvement district. And what happens once you do? It's not just easy once it's formed. You have to manage expectations. One of the common things that happens once the special improvement district is created is everyone thinks it will be the be-all, end-all that solves all the problems. And while you have to perform and deliver, you also have to manage the expectation that, no, this is going to solve every problem that we have. And constantly you have to reference that comprehensive services plan that was passed around to show that, yes, we are doing exactly what we say we're going to do. And you have to continue to perform the outreach. The special improvement district legislation dictates that you do have to have public meetings, board meetings that is. They are usually not attended by the general public. At least we've only had that happen in a few instances, but they have to be publicized in obviously in your local media, in the paper, and they are open to the public. And there has to be one annual meeting a year where the board of directors are renominated, just as like a typical 501c3 organization has as well. And in the early stages, until you're solidified, you have to hold regular stakeholder meetings with especially some of the groups that were really involved in the creation of the district. I highly recommend, especially if you're doing a clean and safe or a maintenance and cleaning program, that you keep detailed records of what you're doing and generating statistics. It is always nice to be able to produce a monthly report that shows how much trash was being collected or how much graffiti you were removing, because then you can go back and say during your renewal process, what would happen if we weren't here? Where would this trash go, and where was it going before we were even around? And the second, or the final thing, if you have within your budget, and it's not usually very expensive if you're doing a maintenance model, is find a way to ensure accountability. Within our downtown, we have a very simple a reporting system called a pipe tour, and the ambassadors actually carry the pipe tour around, and they must tap a series of buttons located throughout the district to show that they were actually visiting that area, that they went down there, whatever, 3 times a day, because you will often have property owners sometimes who aren't at the property very much that say, I'm not seeing what they're doing, whereas you now can print a report that details that, yes, exactly, these people are coming by on a regular basis. And this is just some examples of what we had before. We take pictures of everything that we do. Our ambassadors are actually equipped with iPod touches that have cameras, so after they're done with their shift, they download that data into a computer, so we have a record of all the graffiti, trash, and special projects that were done that day. I did mention briefly how DCA is the contractor for the Special Improvement District in Ohio City. I just wanted to mention that that is an option that can bring in some earned income, but I also caution people because with expanded service can also be an expansion of headaches and staff time, especially now that you've got a second board that you're dealing with in another service area. The expansion also has to cover itself. It has to be self-sufficient. It's actually illegal to have SID dollars spent outside of the SID. So any contract services must be done in a way that they can wholly support themselves. And in our case, we did have some additional resources. We clean during the day here from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. So our equipment, our power washers and our vacuum machines, were sitting in the afternoon hours doing nothing. So we had the resources to be able to expand and say, you know, we can all share these resources. It makes sense. But every district has to ask themselves whether or not that does make sense. With that, I just wanted to put my contact information up there so that you could call me. Feel free to call me or email me with any questions. I wanted to keep the actual presentation a little shorter because I think the best way that I can help you and we can help you is if you ask questions. And I welcome that to start. So I think Joyce was actually going to moderate that, I believe.
Yes, you're welcome to type in questions there in the box to your right. We have one question in so far, and I'll read that to you, Mark. Jennifer wants to know, she says, it seems that making the SID larger would cause it to be more difficult. What was the thinking in making Cleveland's district so large?
For us, we didn't have any sort of geographically defined boundary. We do have these sub-districts, but when we started getting everybody together, the common overall theme was that, you know, to use a cliche, the rising tide floats all ships. We recognize that if we were to have issues, say, in our warehouse district, that eventually that would spill over into the other districts and create a bad image for all of downtown. So luckily, some of our larger property owners in the office towers recognize that while they may be subsidizing some of the other districts, it was in their best interest and, frankly, their employees' best interest that all of downtown collectively as a whole looked well. And to be frank, we did look at even creating the SID larger when we started, but those were the geographic areas that we could get the SID past to start with. There were some properties to the east and to the west that it just didn't make sense at the time to have service down there. But luckily, our board had the foresight to say, yeah, we need to make all of downtown clean and safe, not just certain pockets. And I'll tell you anecdotally, one of the nice things about that is after about 2 years of our collective vision, our board was set up in a way where there were certain members from certain districts, and we had a certain number of residents and certain number of office tenants, entertainment, et cetera. Now you couldn't tell who represents who because there actually is this collective vision and collective responsibility for the whole district. Everyone recognizes that's important.
All right, another question we have in. Assuming you have a desirable bill of services, how do you convince a property owner to come aboard when they have tenants who are on fixed leases who may already perform some of the safe and clean functions?
So so I think this is probably in reference, like if they actually take care of their own property. I'll tell you, it's tough. It's not an easy sell by any means, but a lot of times you can actually make the economic argument that if the area around it is actually enhanced, it will also enhance the value of their own property. We still have this issue in downtown. We have several property owners that are very, very good at maintaining their own properties, but I think after, and it's hard in the beginning because you haven't seen it in action, it is, they eventually do come around. There is a thing that we have been doing for the past 2 years which may make sense to some people in order to help their property owners come along, and that's actually to do a pilot program. We've been doing this in the neighborhood for 2 years now. This is the second year we've done it. So from Memorial Day to Labor Day, they raised, I think it was about $25,000 or $30,000, and they contracted with us, and we sent a clean and safe team over to the area to basically show what a clean and safe program could do. And what was great about it afterwards is when we ended the program, they were all collectively very sad to see it end, because normally when a project's done, they said, you know, the dust settles. Well, when this project ended, the dust rose back up and it became dirty again. So that's kind of a unique thing that not a lot of people have started yet, but you may want to think about is if you could show that a pilot program could work, you might be able to convince your property owners to come around.
Okay, our next question is, can a SID board contract with the city to provide snow removal, litter and graffiti removal, etc.?
Yeah, technically yes. The SID can contract with any agency, although I've never encountered a situation where the SID contracted with the municipality. They always, every organization I've ever met with and worked with, they actually contract with an outside entity. When you can do this, one of the things that helped us when we passed the Special Improvement District is that we created an agreement with our city on a list of protocols, and the protocols dictated that even though we were passing the Special Improvement District, it was an enhancement, and that the city would not reduce its services because of the Special Improvement District. So because we were there, they were going to stop sweeping the streets on a regular basis. So that's another thing you can create protocols with. But as far as technically, yes, you can contract with them.
Okay, our next question is, what were some challenges DCA experienced as you were setting up the SID during the first few years?
Actually, when we were setting it up, in terms of we had gotten it passed, one of the challenges was, could we actually deliver? Because when we started, we had a series of problems, and probably the biggest problem right away, we got the downtown clean, but it was really the perception of it. We were able to make downtown clean and safe, but even though we had done that, we weren't really reaching an outside market. The people who were already down here already knew what it looked like. They could see the physical change. It was then trying to go back to all the people who hadn't been downtown in 20 years to say, it's not the downtown that you remember, it's different, it's better now. So once we got it clean and safe, our next iteration in our second phase was actually a very strong marketing campaign, and we continue that marketing campaign to this day, and has even expanded to include a business development center where we look for companies and others who haven't been down here. We just invite them down to see what it actually is, and then we also do some print, video, and advertising to try to show people that yes, it has changed. I'll also mention when we started, we identified a list of priorities that were essential that people wanted tackled. One of them was panhandling and homelessness within downtown, and that was a challenge because you had different competing factions thinking about which way was the best way to get it done. So as part of our special improvement district, we actually hired a social worker to be on staff, and she has done a miraculous job. Since the special improvement district started, we had the annual count show that there was maybe 20 or 30 people sleeping on our streets every night. We now have 5, which we still need to work on, but I think that's a major improvement, and we reduced panhandling by 40%. So that was a huge challenge that I think we tackled the right way, and by doing that, we actually partnered with our faith-based community, the churches, and the Jewish Community Federation here in downtown to actually be our liaison between those two groups and implement a program.
Okay, the next question asks, can you discuss in more detail the relationship between your SID board and your DCA board?
The SID board, by its very nature, must be made up of property owners. So everybody on that board obviously owns a parcel or represents somebody who owns a parcel on the board. Our Downtown Cleveland Alliance board is much more diverse in its interests. So when it was formed, we dictated that we had to have a certain number of residents on the board, a certain amount of people from geographic areas around downtown, so enough people from the theater, warehouse, gateway. Our city council member is on the board, a mayor's representative is on the board, and then we've also expanded our board because by, how should I put it, our board was very, very old and very, very white, to be blunt about it. So what we've done is actually expanded the board to try to bring in more diversity. We have a young leadership program that tries to get people in our board. But the boards actually, some people sit on the SID board and also on the DCA board. And we invite both boards to come to both meetings so that there is a constant dialogue between each group. And now that it's been 7 years, I actually sometimes can't remember who sits on what board because they are so intermingled now, which is a good thing because the same amount of policy discussion, the same amount of information is dealt with on both boards. It's just that the SID board is by law restricted to only property owners.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. When we were talking about the contracts possibly for city services, this question has to do with, because you start contracting out, do you actually end up saving the city money by having these extra service contracts? And are there any other labor issues involved with that?
Well, yeah, I do think just anecdotally you do end up saving the city saving them a little bit of money because you're taking trash off the sidewalks before it ends up in the street and ends up in the sewer system in the gutter. So I don't know, I've never read a study where there was actual hard data to show this is what we're saving, but you know, on the flip side, you can also say that because you're saving the city money, you're also helping leverage more tax dollars into the district because people want to invest now that it's clean and safe. There are labor issues, and if you can read about them, they're in every city. Cleveland, not different than the others. We continue to have a labor issue here in Cleveland in that our city workers fear that the SID is taking away their jobs, and so we are not allowed to touch any city-owned parcels for cleaning. So our ambassadors clean all the sidewalks, but they are not allowed to walk into any city-owned park. That issue, it actually exists in other cities as well. Pittsburgh, for example, actually their clean program is actually unionized as a result of that. We do have a great relationship with the Cleveland Police Department, and we do hire Cleveland police officers as off-duty safety patrols for ours, so we don't have a labor issue on the safety side, but we and others do have labor issues on the clean side, determining on what we can clean and what we can't. And it results in some very unique situations where, like an adopt a park agreement where we're not allowed to clean up on hardscape, but we can clean trash out of plants. And it's very strange.
Okay, a question about, in determining the clean model, how were you able to determine what it would take to implement and what the final cost per linear foot would be? And how did you determine the multiplier of the assessed value?
Well, in our case, we actually had consultants come into town to look at what it would take for our downtown to reach a certain threshold of cleanliness. And I'll use the analogy we used 7 years ago. We were presented with 3 plans. The Cadillac plan, where we would have 24-hour safety and security, the sedan plan, where we would make sure it was clean and safe during the day, and we would power wash and we would do all these things, but we would not do snow removal or graffiti up on high ends of buildings. And then the very compact model, which was like a seasonal type program, half the staff that we currently have. And ultimately, our property owners decided the sedan model was the best way to go, and that's what we could get past. There was a lot of complex calculation involved. Obviously, the cap is there for a reason, so that, as I mentioned, some of our higher buildings don't get overly assessed. But the value thing was actually to determine how we could get enough money to get that plan in place to go. So, as I mentioned in the presentation, a lot of times people try to figure out how much they can raise versus on the model. We did it the opposite way. We looked at what the plan and our model was going to be, and then we figured out what the formula should be in order to get enough money to implement that plan. And we looked at other cities. I think Columbus and Cincinnati have a very similar model to us, and that's we kind of copied best practices from others. So there's no magic in the way the formula was created. It was just that we knew what we had to do in order to implement that plan.
Okay, the next question. Can a SID be expanded at any time, or is it limited to the 5-year renewal period?
You can only renew it during the 5-year renewal period. If you decide to expand the boundary, you have to go back and then redo the petition process, which then would create another 5-year period, so to speak. So whenever we've looked at expanding, we've always done it in concurrence with a renewal. We've never done it in the sense where we've expanded the boundary during the 5-year period. You certainly can do that in the sense that you can go through the process again in the middle of the 5-year period if you want. For example, we renew our SID during the 4th year to make sure that there's no lag in services.
The next question, what percentage of the total DCA non-clean and safe staff time is funded by the SID?
Oh, probably less than 20%. The majority of our SID dollars are, again, spent on clean and safe. We have a 10% management carryover that the Downtown Cleveland Improvement Corporation gives to the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, but the majority of our staff are actually paid for using the grants that we use the SID money to leverage.
Okay, the next question is, can funds from the SID go towards building improvement projects in the district, such as facade renovations or signage?
Yes, it can. As long as it's in the comprehensive services plan, that is a usable item. We do use some of the SID dollars to do minor capital repair, but if your comprehensive services plan is more so for a streetscape facade redo, it's perfectly fine, like a streetscape redevelopment project. Yes, that can be done. And other cities, especially ours, as we look to mature, we will look at things like, should we do a complete lighting redo, and the SID can be used for that.
All right, I'm out of questions. If anybody has something they'd like to type in, please get those typed in right away. And Mark, I guess, are there any your favorite tips or that you haven't shared already within the PowerPoint?
Well, I do, like I mentioned, I do like that our SID and the Downtown Cleveland Alliance kind of worked together to tackle projects, so people could actually see that there was movement when, as soon as the program launched. And when we started, I mentioned homelessness was one of the issues, but a public square redesign was a task force, and our lakefront events and marketing. And what was great about this is we actually created task forces from the community to look at these issues. So even though our SID board can only be made up of property owners, and our board itself is made up of 25 members, we were able to keep the community engaged and all the things that we were doing because we let these task forces form and run with the other projects that were important to our area. And for example, you can Google or go online anytime. One of our projects was the public square redesign. We are now at the point where we are very close to redeveloping public square, and that was an initiative that was first started with the formation of the SID, and people got very excited, and now we're going to redo a park. Again, our homelessness task force was instrumental in creating a downtown homeless fund that we use, the SID actually uses to buy birth certificates and IDs for homeless individuals downtown so that we can help them get back on their feet, get housing, and get employment. And so all these projects, even though the SID was narrow in its focus and that it was clean and safe, it created a ripple effect within the community to get more engagement that we could actually get things done.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question that's come in. Does the SID board have sole decision-making power to choose the SID operator?
Yes. Yes, it does. The SID board does choose, most of the time, the community development organization that has led the process is chosen as its implementer. Very rarely have actually, I don't think I've ever seen it where they just decided to go it alone. But yeah, the SID board has ultimate authority. In our situation, the Downtown Cleveland Improvement Corporation has a contract with DCA that says until we decide otherwise, forever DCA will be the implementation agency of our SID.
Okay, any other last questions? I don't see any more coming in. Mark, thank you so much for the presentation. For you participants, I will be sending the PDF of the presentation, and Mark had a guide that he was going to send, which I will also forward to you. These webinars are a benefit of Heritage Ohio membership, so we appreciate the support all of you provide in helping Heritage Ohio to help people save the places that matter. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.